this gets me into my favorite graph I think that I've ever seen from the IPCC. So this is the next one. So it's a little daunting at first, but I can walk you through it.
This is the many options. No, this is the same one. Okay. I think I saw this in Mist.
Yeah, exactly. This is okay. So it's actually not that bad. So on the left-hand side is the mitigation options that we were looking at before. So energy systems, agricultural, forestry, and other land use, urban systems, buildings, transport, and industry. So these are different ways that we can mitigate our impact on the environment. On the right, all those dots and all those pluses and the blue squares are sustainable development goals. So like basically we're looking at ways that our mitigation goals align with our sustainable and development goals. So what are some examples of the related sustainable development goals? On the bottom, they're listed. So number 1 is no poverty. Number 2 is zero hunger. 3 is good health and well-being. 4 is quality education. 5, gender equality. 6, clean water and sanitation. So we can kind of see that, okay, so these are a lot of different things on the top that are listed out. And then the coloring for each of these squares has to deal with the confidence level that we have that these two things align. So gray is low confidence, light blue is medium confidence, and dark blue is high confidence. So what we're looking for is basically ways that we're looking for dark blue squares on things that we care about.
Yeah.
So like for example, gender equality. So 5. If we take 5 down, all the way down, you just follow 5 down, we can see where
the website would let me do that.
Okay, well I can list them out for you. So 5 is gender equality. Okay, but how does gender equality have anything to do with the environment? Well, we have medium confidence that it impacts for the benefit, by the way. So that's what the plus sign is, that there's synergies there. So plus is urban land use and spatial planning. Again, gender equality has things to do with electrification of the urban energy system, integrating sectors, strategies, and innovations, efficient appliances. And we actually have our first dark blue one. So high confidence that gender equality and shift to public transport are synergized. There's actually high confidence that gender equality and electrification are both synergizing together. So why is that? In order to do that, you have to kind of like go into the chapter source and you have to read this thing. And there's a 1,000-page document that has to do with it. But the whole point is that I read it, so I can tell you. Basically, throughout the world, what we see is that as societies move to more gender equality, their grids are more electrified. We have more of an investment into public infrastructure for roads and for public transportation and that kind of thing. And it has to deal with actually basically women spending more time on public transport than men for the same amount of distance. So they spend more time and they basically commute for longer distances. So when they get into power and they get into places of equality, the first thing that they do is they invest in those systems. So I think it's a good highlight of like, what do we do now? So how can we as, people that are living, maybe I'm not a climate scientist, maybe I'm not a scientist. How can I actually like make a difference on these issues? Well, I mean, you can actually make a difference by going, advocating for gender equality, things like this, where it's like, these are things that you wouldn't think would normally be linked, but they are. And, I think that the takeaway is basically that.
That's a really good way to put that. Thank you. That was helpful.
Oh, cool. Awesome. I love this graph. I think this is one of the coolest graphs that the IPCC has ever done because it really links together issues that you don't think would be like, if you're a human rights lawyer, maybe they're thinking, oh, how could I I'm really worried about climate change too. Why would it matter? And it's like, no, man, go queen, do what you want to do, like just go off, and you can have a huge impact. Don't it's like we need people to be engaged and to be progressing their societies forward and trying to make progress on issues. That's the way that we actually impact these things. These issues and these huge global issues can be kind of taken down and chipped away if everyone kind of just gets involved at the local level and gets involved with making progress on poverty, hunger, gender equality, quality education, clean water, affordable energy, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, climate action. That's kind of a little obvious, but there's a lot of different ways that people can get involved, and it's not just like, oh, I have to become a scientist now in order to solve this issue.
I'm gonna go over this a little bit more in my off time. This is actually, thank you very much. This opens this all up to me in a very efficient way. I just saw this spread of tables that were just, oh my god.
Yeah, it's a little daunting, but I think,
Yeah.
but to go over kind of like where does this link to, at least in the United States, like for example, your cities. So your cities have climate action plans. What is your city's climate action plan? What are they doing? So what's their plan for the future? The cities are already looking at this and already plotting their way forward. I know my city just got a huge grant for a lot of renewable energy and a lot of a lot of that infrastructure because they're trying to build this out. Two, you can also go to like city hall meetings, so you can actually make your voice heard. You can actually, a lot of them are Zoom now or over the internet. Try to go to them in person if you can, if you care a lot about it. And then also and then if you wanted to get even more involved, at least in the United States, there's a ton of boards and commissions that have open spots that you could go, and a lot of them are unelected actually. You can just go talk to your city council member, say that you're interested in getting involved. These are your biggest issues, and then go. I would also really encourage people to kind of like fall in love with nature, be in nature, figure out a way that, your local natural space, maybe it's a park, maybe it's a beach, anything, go there. Get in touch with it. See what kind of animals you can see. Go insect hunting. Go see, what kind of animals you can see. What are the different types of plants and animals and birds that you see there? And then go into these city halls and these boards and advocate for your space. Become a spokesperson for this environment. And this has a huge impact, by the way, in like zoning commissions, where zoning commissions has a huge impact on like putting parking lots in places. So right now we have archipelagos of nature where it's just islands and islands and islands, and they're not connected together. So going there and advocating for like, hey, this is going to break up this entire nature space into two separate spaces. I don't agree with this. Or if they do that, maybe we can have a roadway or a bridge or nature walk so that they can actually migrate, which is very important for nature. At the state level, at the United States, that's where we have drastic differences in sustainable practices. So between like California, for example, that's like 63% non-carbon, to the entire United States is only 19%. That's including California. So a lot of these states are digging their heels in. They're digging and they're purposefully not transitioning to these non-carbon based energy platforms. Push them for it. Ask them about that. Make an issue about it. You don't have to. You can go and ask questions at their speeches. You can, or even run for office. That's not too crazy.
And in addition to that, you can read about it. Can you give me any research suggestions going forward? Because I will be moving back to this after my next little
interesting
sort of research focus. Because I'm going to be I'm doing a long preparation for an argument with Destiny at some point about progressive orthodoxy in universities.
Okay.
But we will be coming back to this topic fairly soon after that, because this one's, I think, probably one of the most pressing ones possible. So
that's a good question. I mean, nowadays, I'm sorry to say, but I'm reading a lot of science papers. I can send you some science papers there and post them. I'll post them in your the Discord, the Science and Technology channel. my favorite ones. There's a lot of there are ecologists that are kind of like framing this in more of like a, hey, we got it, like our animals are dying. It's not just CO2
Yeah.
ppms too. That there are so that's an interesting. Those are interesting ones, and trying to change into like a conserve what's here and restore populations that have gone extinct. Those are two things. But honestly, for most people, I would say, go like what your interest is, and then try to learn about that. So like I'm a biologist, I care about like living things, but maybe it is about like, I don't know, maybe you care about CO2. Maybe you're a numbers guy, you're analytics, and you want to do a carbon footprint, and you want to figure out what you can cut from your diet or what you're buying in order to decrease your CO2s. Like, do that. Go. The figure, our last figure showed that there's so many different ways. There's so many different ways to contribute. And I'm not trying to gatekeep or tell anyone that this is how you're supposed to do it. Like, go whatever, is good with you. By the way, just stop buying palm oil. That's like the best thing that you could do. Just, there's no reason to buy palm oil. There's tons of different options, and it's really, really unsustainable. So that's something that you can cut right now. But like just like falling in love with nature.
Have you tried Nutella? It's really good.
Yeah, exactly. Just like falling in love with nature, figuring out what ways you can connect with nature. Personally, when I was growing up, I love David Attenborough documentaries. I'm addicted to those. I got my kids addicted to them, so now I can watch them with them. I love zoos. Zoos are actually really, there's a lot of people that are like anti-zoo and aquarium for some reason now. It's like that doesn't make any sense to me. If people don't even, especially aquariums, man, like people, it's a different world down there. How could you possibly know about the incredible nature in the oceans if you can't see it, if you can't actually view it? And that's what the aquariums are so good for, and that's what why they're so important in my opinion. So just I love documentaries. I love documentaries is like my go-to, and then obviously the science reports.
One of the best places for like enchanting this kind of research, not that I've like done a particularly admirable amount of it myself, but science fiction is obsessed with this topic, and it shows you like how it intersects with a bunch of other things. So if for whatever reason like animals and ecosystems and all this kind of thing, that kind of stuff doesn't like appeal to you directly, like you can see exactly how it touches on everything else in ways that make it extremely interesting to whatever it is that you are specifically interested in.
I love that you mentioned that, man. Because that's what my channel, I want people to think when I talk about stuff. I want them not to believe it. I want them to think that this is science fiction. There's no way that this is actually happening, but it is. And that's what's so cool is like we're making so many strides. Like, for example, with nanotechnology, we kind of like people got introduced to nanotechnology because of the mRNA vaccines, but those lipid nanoparticles, that's like 30 years old, man. That's some old technology. There's some incredible breakthroughs that have happened in the last 3 decades. And even I published a paper, a review in Nature Nanotechnology with, going over nanotechnology based solutions. And we could have huge advancements. So like, for example, the big problem with runoff, that we were talking about before, basically all the nutrients and stuff getting into the waterways, and then that having confounding problems with the the algae populations. What if plants got nutrients as they needed it and only as they needed it? So that's kind of like where the field of nanotechnology is going, where you have plants acting as sentinels that are able to tell drones or some type of off-site camera that like, oh hey, I'm phosphorus limited right now, and then you deliver phosphorus just as it's needed to that plant, and then maybe even directly to the organelle that's going to need that phosphorus too. So it's not just like smothering the plant with phosphorus and only 10% of it's getting in. We're actually using the ability for nanotechnology and nanoparticles to actually get into the plants to actually deliver phosphorus. And stuff like that, all these other minerals and stuff like that. So, and you could basically have, drones or automated farming techniques to monitor and deliver nutrients as you need it. And kind of like, the 21st century paradigm of just slathering everything with everything. Just it's kind of dead. The old paradigm of excess nutrients to your plants is kind of it's tired, and we can improve that now with nanotechnology based solutions. So this is a a little farther off. We're not using nanotechnology in fields yet. This is not we're not spraying nanoparticles or whatever in the environment, but this is we're doing this at the lab scale now, and I'm trying to tell you, like, maybe in the future this is what we could, but the new generation of farming could be based off of.
That's really interesting. Yeah, send me some stuff. I'll have time to look through it fairly soon, I think.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much for coming on. Please come back at some point. Do you want to shout out your channel quickly before we wrap up?
Yeah, my name's Greg. I got a YouTube channel called The Peer Review. You can get there by going to thepeer.review. And yeah, I'm just covering the taglines, like I'm covering the cool stuff in science that you don't know about. So I just did a huge thing with my friend on lab-grown meat or culturable meat. There's new advancements in that area that might decrease the cost of cultured meat by a third. So it's a huge 60% reduction in the cost of lab-grown meat by doing these special airlift fermenters and growing them at gigantic scales, 250,000 liters. It's just a really cool possibility and a really cool way of using
satisfying our insatiable hunger for amorphous flesh. Yes.
Exactly. I mean, it's also, it's not just food though too, right? It's fuel, like we were just talking about with algae, but it's also a lot of ways that plastic's being made. So you can make plastics, those carbon bonds can be made through renewable sources. So we might be able in the future, and a lot of plastics already, spandex and all that kind of stuff is already kind of used for fermented for fermented means. And we talk about in the episode about xanthan gum, for example, like the problems with xanthan gum through fermentation. And yeah, it's just a really cool way of like microbes. I mean, I'm a microbiology PhD candidate, so I'm a little biased, but I feel like microbiology is such a cool field right now, and it's really the it's the new frontier, man. It's like the new cowboy. Just out there, there's so much to be discovered, and there's so many problems that we're having that microbes impact and do so well. And I think that in the future, we're just going to be using those things as absolute workhorses, and it's such a cool field.